You ever wonder why some part of you keeps shrinking, right when you should be stepping up? Like there's this invisible ceiling just above your head. You feel the pressure. You feel the calling. But then, you hesitate. You second guess. You fall back into silence. And later you tell yourself the same story. Next time, I'll go for it. But you don't. Not because you're lazy, not because you lack ambition, but because deep inside, something else is pulling the strings. And here's the truth most people never realize. Playing small isn't a conscious decision. It's a deeply rehearsed survival pattern, rooted not in logic, but in the oldest architecture of your psyche. Let's go deeper. In psychology, there's a term called the inferiority complex, but that's just the surface symptom. Beneath it is something far more ancient. Carl Jung would call it the shadow self, the part of you that was pushed into the dark when you were too young to know better, the part that felt unsafe being bold, the part that learned that standing out meant standing alone. Maybe you were told not to show off. Maybe your confidence was called arrogance. Maybe your wins triggered jealousy. Or maybe, when you finally tried to speak up, someone shut you down so hard, your nervous system encoded it as danger. That moment got stored in your body like a scar, not a memory, a program. And ever since, you've been running that same program in silence. You don't even hear it anymore. But it's there. Every time you hesitate before saying what you really think. Every time you let someone else take credit for your idea. Every time you dim your light to make someone else more comfortable. It's not just humility. It's trauma dressed up as modesty. But here's the sinister part. Because the mind is a meaning-making machine, it doesn't just repeat the behavior. It builds an identity around it. You start saying things like, I'm just not a leader. I'm more of a behind-the-scenes kind of person. I don't like attention. And maybe part of that's true, but how much of it is you? And how much is a scared version of you pretending that safety is the same thing as peace? You weren't born to play small. You were conditioned into it. And the scariest part, you don't even realize when it's happening, because the people who play small the most are the ones who are secretly afraid of their own power. Let's look at why. There's a term in neuroscience called homeostatic resistance. It means your brain, just like your body, tries to keep everything in balance, even if that balance is dysfunctional. So, if your nervous system got wired in an environment where being invisible felt safe, then invisibility becomes the baseline, and anything that threatens it, even success, even praise, even leadership, feels like a violation. In other words, growth feels like danger, and your subconscious will do whatever it takes to pull you back into the known, even if the known is killing your potential. You ever get that feeling right after you post something bold online? That weird, itchy panic, like you want to delete it before anyone sees. That's your subconscious trying to reel you back in, not because it hates you, but because it thinks it's protecting you. That's how powerful the system is. You've got a self-made prison, with the keys already in your hand. But the first step to escaping it is to realize you're locked inside. And that's where things start to shift. Not when you try harder, not when you fake confidence, but when you understand the forces behind your self-sabotage. When you see that playing small isn't just a mindset issue, it's a nervous system strategy. And the moment you see it, you can start to rewrite it. Because here's the thing no one tells you. Your psyche isn't trying to ruin your life. It's trying to keep you alive. It just doesn't realize. You're not that child anymore. And the world that made you play small, it doesn't own you now. But your shadow, it's still waiting to be acknowledged. Still with me? Good. Because this rabbit hole goes deeper than you think. You ever notice how some people seem to walk into a room and take up space without trying? And how others shrink, even when they have just as much to say? It's not charisma. It's not extroversion. It's integration. Because what most people don't realize is this. The reason you play small isn't because you lack potential. It's because part of you is afraid of what owning your full potential would cost. Let that sink in. The mind runs on equations, emotional equations. And one of the most dangerous ones is this: visibility outweighs risk. Why? Because somewhere in your early life, you saw what happens when people become too visible. Maybe someone you looked up to was publicly humiliated. Maybe you watched someone's success trigger gossip, envy, or betrayal. Maybe you were praised for staying quiet, for being agreeable, for not rocking the boat. So your unconscious learned the lesson. If I stay small, I stay safe. And that equation got buried so deep that now, as an adult, you don't even question it. You just feel the resistance and call it instinct. Or worse, personality. But here's where Jung would challenge you. He'd say that this resistance you feel, this hesitation, it's not weakness. It's your shadow self knocking. The parts of you that were exiled in order to fit in. The bold part, the assertive part, the part that speaks without rehearsing, the part that knows exactly what it wants and doesn't apologize for it. You didn't kill those parts, you buried them. And every time you play small, you keep the shovel in your hand. But the shadow doesn't die. It waits. And if you don't integrate it, it finds other ways to be seen. This is why you self-sabotage right when you're doing well. Why you procrastinate on the thing that would change your life. Why you envy people who take risks, even though deep down you know you're capable of the same. Because your shadow isn't your enemy. It's the version of you that remembers who you were before the world taught you to flinch. And every time you silence it, your psyche cracks just a little more. You split in half. There's the you the world gets, and the you hide. And the longer those two stay disconnected, the more exhausting life becomes. Because performance is tiring. Pretending to be smaller than you are is the heaviest costume you'll ever wear. And the wildest part? Most people will praise you for it. They'll call you humble, modest, nice, empathetic. But deep down, you know the truth. It's not humility if it hurts. It's not kindness if it costs you your voice. Real power doesn't demand attention, but it doesn't run from it either. And if you find yourself constantly shrinking, constantly overthinking, constantly biting your tongue just to keep the peace, you're not being noble. You're betraying your future. And the worst part, you're teaching the people around you that your silence is normal, that your invisibility is deserved, that your voice isn't needed. But it is. Not just for you, for everyone who's waiting for permission to stop playing small themselves. Because here's the paradox. Every time you hide your greatness, you're reinforcing the belief that greatness should be hidden, that confidence is arrogance, that ambition is greed, that power is something you should apologize for. But what if it's not? What if power, real power, is simply alignment? What if playing big isn't about ego, but about integrity? What if the most dangerous thing isn't being too visible, but being invisible to yourself? Think about that, and ask yourself this. Who benefits from you staying small? Really think about it, because it's not your soul, and it's definitely not the version of you that's still waiting to be seen. Let's pull back the curtain. There's a reason you can feel your own potential and still not act on it. It's because your mind and body are running two completely different scripts. Your conscious mind says, I want more, I'm ready, I can do this. But your nervous system whispers, no, you're not. You'll get hurt. Stay small. And guess who usually wins? The one that's been trained longer. See, most people try to fix this with willpower. They push, they hustle, they force themselves to show up. But eventually, they burn out. Why? Because you can't outwork a subconscious belief that says growth on danger. And this is where neuroscience and psychology intersect. The amygdala, your brain's emotional smoke alarm, doesn't care about your goals. It cares about familiarity. So even if success would make your life better, your brain still reads it as a threat if it disrupts the old patterns. That's why people sabotage themselves right before a breakthrough. It's not weakness, it's wiring. Now let's flip the lens. Carl Jung didn't believe the ego was evil. He saw it as a necessary container for the self. But here's the problem. Most egos are built to survive, not thrive. They're constructed from early experiences, social feedback, family expectations. And once built, they resist anything that contradicts their structure. So if your ego has decided I'm the helper, or I'm the background guy, or I'm never the center of attention, then the moment life offers you the opposite, your ego doesn't celebrate. It panics. It goes, "This isn't me, this isn't safe, abort mission." And you shrink. Not because you failed, but because part of you still thinks being small is your only shot at being loved. This is what psychologists call identity death, the fear that stepping into a new role will destroy who you've been. And in some ways, it will. Because the version of you that plays small, that version will have to die. The over-apologizer, the people-pleaser, the self-silencer, all of them have to go. But that's the price of expansion. You don't just level up your habits, you level up your sense of self. And that's terrifying. Until it isn't. Until you realize that playing small didn't just protect you, it caged you. That every time you stayed quiet to avoid conflict, you created one inside yourself. That every time you said, "I'm fine," when you weren't, you convinced your body it wasn't allowed to feel. That every time you watched someone else take the spotlight, a little piece of you wondered why you gave yours away. This is where the inner war begins, between the part of you that wants more and the part that's scared to want at all. But there's a turning point, and it doesn't come when you feel ready. It comes when you stop negotiating with your fear like it's in charge. Fear's job is to keep you alive, but your job is to live. And playing small, it's not living. It's rehearsing your own disappearance. Every time you hold back your idea, you disappear. Every time you fake agreement just to avoid friction, you disappear. Every time you say yes when your soul is screaming no, you disappear. And you think you're doing it to keep the peace. But peace without self-expression is just quiet suffering. So if you're tired, if you're burned out and numb and secretly resentful, that's not failure. That's the alarm clock going off. The version of you that's settled, he's running out of oxygen. And the next version? He's standing just outside the fire exit, waiting for you to stop calling the cage a home. Let's talk about authority. Not external authority, bosses, critics, audiences, internal authority. The voice you believe the most when the lights go out. The reason you play small has less to do with the world around you, and everything to do with the voice inside you that narrates your worth. Because even when no one's judging you, you still hear it. Don't be too much. They'll think you're arrogant. You're not ready for this. Who do you think you are? And the worst part, you think that voice is you, but it's not. It's an internalized echo, crafted by years of conditioning, criticism, and survival. Maybe it sounds like a parent, a teacher, an old friend, an entire culture that rewards conformity over courage. but now it lives inside you as a voice of reason. Except it's not reasonable. It's small, and it wants you to be small too. Here's the truth no one tells you. The mind doesn't resist success. It resists disloyalty to the self-image it's clung to for years. You've been trained to protect the identity that others approved of. And if that identity is humble, quiet, agreeable, low maintenance, then being loud, bold, or opinionated feels like betrayal, not just to others, but to the false self you've spent your life maintaining. And this is why people don't change. Not really, because they're addicted to being consistent with the image they believe others expect of them. And breaking that image feels like ego death, like a rejection of their entire emotional ecosystem. But what if that's exactly what needs to happen? What if the next level of your life requires the death of the version of you who needed to be liked more than he needed to be whole? Because here's what Jung believed. The path to individuation, the path to becoming whole, requires confrontation with the shadow. Not just seeing it, integrating it, not just realizing, oh, I have a bold side, but giving that bold side a seat at the table, letting it speak, letting it say what it really wants without censorship, letting it contradict your old identity. That's the work, because until you do that, your growth will always have a glass ceiling. You'll read the books, watch the videos, set the goals. But when the spotlight comes, you'll dim it. Not because you're unworthy, but because your self-image hasn't caught up with your power. So what do? You stop waiting to feel worthy. Worthiness is not a precondition. It's a byproduct of ownership. You start acting as if your voice belongs in the room. You start moving as if your presence has gravity. And here's where it gets strange. At first, it will feel fake, forced, awkward, even arrogant, because your nervous system isn't used to it. But that's not a sign you're doing it wrong. It's a sign you're leaving the old self behind. Growth always feels like a betrayal of your old patterns. Because it is, and there's grief in that. But there's also freedom. Because the moment you stop playing small, not with defiance but with calm authority, you start to rewire the system. Not just in your mind, but in your body, in your posture, in your tone, in the way people feel you when you enter a room. That's the kind of transformation no affirmation can touch. It's not about shouting your worth into a mirror. It's about embodying it so fully that your silence says it for you. And when that starts to happen, people notice. Not because you've changed, but because you finally stopped hiding. There's a moment in every life where you realize you've been the jailer and the prisoner, that all the limits you thought were outside of you were actually built by you. And the scariest part of all, you built them with good intentions. You stayed quiet to keep the peace. You played small to stay safe. You blended in to avoid rejection. And it worked. Until it didn't. Until the safety became suffocating. Until the silence turned into self-erasure. Until the voice in your head wasn't protection anymore. It was punishment. And now you're standing at a threshold. Not the kind you can see, but the kind you feel in your chest. In that subtle ache every time you downplay your ideas. In that sting behind your smile when you say, it's fine. But it isn't. It's not fine anymore. Because something inside you has shifted. And that shift isn't just a mindset. It's a call. A call from the part of you that remembers who you were before the shrinking began. And here's the truth. The future you want isn't waiting for you to earn it. It's waiting for you to claim it. You don't need to become someone else. You need to unbecome the version of you that thought playing small was noble. Because real nobility, it's not found in self-erasure. It's found in self-possession, in standing tall not to dominate, but to be seen clearly. In speaking up not to argue, but to take your rightful place. In being big, unapologetically, because shrinking is no longer an option. This isn't about ego, it's about energy. Because playing small doesn't just hurt you, it weakens the field you're a part of. Every time you minimize yourself, you're teaching the room that power must come with apology, that confidence must be softened, that truth must be filtered. But the people who change things, they don't shrink to fit the room. They expand the room to fit their truth. And sometimes, yes, that makes others uncomfortable. Let them be. Because if your bigness offends someone, that's not a reflection of you. It's a reflection of what they haven't faced in themselves. You don't owe the world your silence. You owe it your truth. And maybe, just maybe, the real reason you've been playing small is because you knew the moment you stopped, things would change, that relationships would shift, that some people wouldn't know how to handle your power, that the mirror would crack and the old story would dissolve. And you were right. Things will change, but not because you're being someone you're not, because you're finally being who you always were, underneath the fear. And that's not arrogance. That's alignment. That's individuation. That's power reclaimed. So here's your invitation. The next time you feel yourself about to shrink, pause. Feel the script rise up. And don't fight it. Just smile and choose a different line. Say what you mean. Take the space. Hold the eye contact. Speak as if your words have gravity. Because they do. And watch what happens. The world doesn't get smaller. It adjusts. It expands to meet you. Because when you stop playing small, you don't just change your life. You change your field, your family, your legacy. The psychology of playing small isn't just a study in fear. It's a call to mastery, a reminder that the voice you've been waiting for all along has always been yours. It's time. Answer it.